So throughout this offseason, we focused a lot on the Chicago Bulls, either the new additions or the young players on this team and how that sets a new foundation for the Chicago Bulls. But on today's episode, we're actually going to switch the focus a little bit more towards the veterans. And I know that may be something that's not popular to talk about, but I think the veterans not only bring some needed edge to this team, but they bring some potential added firepower to the trade deadline for the Chicago Bulls if the Bulls do want to make some moves that could potentially lead them to stacking some picks. We're going to talk a little bit about that, which of these veterans actually survive past the trade deadline, and why they could all help the Chicago Bulls win more games this upcoming year. We're going to talk about that. We're going to look at Norman Powell, Nic Claxton, Tre Jones, Zach Collins, Jalen Smith, and Isaac Okoro, and what their roles could be on this team going forward. We're also going to talk about Tiago Splitter and why what the rookies are saying about him says a lot. But these next 3 years specifically are going to tell us whether Tiago Splitter is Mark Jackson, he's going to help set this team up for the next coach to come in, or if he can be Rick Carlisle, and that means being a long-term head coaching option for this team. We're talking about all that plus more right after this. What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host there, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today, y'all. And I want to talk about this, the veterans on this roster. I know I said that at the intro. Wait, by the way, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button. We got a goal of getting to 50,000 subscribers by the start of the 2026-27 season, which leaves us roughly about 3 months to get there. It's a lofty goal to get in 3 months, but hey, if anybody's going to be able to do it, we're going to be able to do it. So out of the 42% of you guys that are not subscribed to the channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. In exchange for that, I'll be giving you guys the best daily Chicago Bulls content you're going to find anywhere. With that said, let's go ahead and get into it, man. So the veterans, right? I understand why so much has been talked about. Like, I've done it, right? We all do it. Everybody's excited about Dalen Swain and Caleb Wilson, what that means for, Modest Buzelis and his continued growth, even Josh Giddey and Noah Essengame, what these guys are going to do in next season. If Noah can prove himself, if Josh Giddey's going to finally shut up all the doubters, all that type of stuff, right? So we get that. And that is the biggest story of this season, is the development of those guys, how those guys look together, and what it means for the Bulls' future and the foundation. But I do think that we have veterans on this team that not only matter for how we're going to play this year and whether they provide depth or whatever they're bringing to this team, and then also firepower at the trade deadline. The Bulls have a number of movable veteran contracts that could become enticing, because guess what? I hate to say this, and I know there are some people that doubt what the Bulls actually have a pretty talented bench. And they have a pretty talented bench that's filled out with some veterans that just know their job and their role, and thus where teams could come calling at the trade deadline, because, hey, playoff teams, they're going to want that same thing. They're going to want veterans on reasonable contracts that then can come in, know exactly what they're going to bring to the role, and help those teams out. And so, therefore, the Bulls do have some juice at the trade deadline just with their veteran contracts. That's not even moving any of the younger players, right? And so I think right now, when you look at it, what Bryson Graham has built is optionality, right? We don't have a finished product yet. Hell, we don't even know if we have a product yet. We know we got potential, but we don't know if we have a product yet. While we can get caught up in all the what ifs and the possibilities of this team and this young player, that's great. The Chicago Bulls have a one roster spot open, which is good, but the chance that we make a major move before October, that's low, right? And, most front offices are going to want to evaluate the current group before they do things, right? And I think that's what Bryson Graham has done this offseason in a lot of ways. He has created optionality, and without having to go, quote unquote, all in, but he's also supported his young guys with veterans that were already either here or some of the guys that he ended up bringing in, right? I think that that's a good thing. Team contracts matter. Team options matter. Expiring deals matter. Mid-sized salary matters. Veterans who can help now or be moved matter. And the Bulls have all of those things. Team options on Zach Collins and Norman Powell. I think Tre Jones has a team option as well. You have that, right? You have the expiring deals. You have that in like a Jalen Smith and Isaac Okoro. You have the expiring deals. You have veterans who can help you grow now or can be moved later, like a Norman Powell, right? You have those things in regards to it. And so this is how rebuilding front offices stay flexible, right? Without completely stripping the roster down. You keep that optionality, you keep that flexibility, and that is what Bryson Graham has done here. And I think that sometimes that can go missed by people who just kind of look at it as a baseline. But I want to talk about what these veterans bring and why they could be moved at the trade deadline and actually moved in deals that work. The first one is Norman Powell, right? Like Norman Powell's brought in here to be the scorer right now. It puts pressure on Jalen Smith not to have to be the scoring wing right away, not to have to start, and it gives you time now to find your long-term wing of the future. Now, that could be on your roster in Jalen Smith. It could not be, right? And we'll end up seeing what happens in that. Oh, by the way, the guy who keeps pushing Rob Dillingham to be the starting shooting guard, are you stupid? Like real talk. Come on. Like even if you want to be the biggest Rob Dillingham fan, to think that Rob Dillingham could be a permanent starting two guard with his defensive inefficiencies, his size issues, his ability not to consistently get his shot off, what are we talking about? Nonetheless, I'm going to get off of that, right? But Norman Powell's 2-year, $45 million deal with a team option, it means Chicago's in complete control of that. He feels an immediate need with scoring, shooting, floor spacing, veteran leadership as well, and he could even survive past this 2-year deal. We could see a world in which, hey, Jalen Smith takes over as the starting two guard in the next 2 years. The Bulls re-sign Norman Powell on a reasonable deal, and he's now our bench scorer for a little bit. It's not a bad veteran move, and he's not a bad veteran contract at all, even though the contract's over $20 million. Only our second contract on the team over $20 million. The other one is Josh Giddey. You know, when you look at it, if Powell plays well, contenders will notice that. And when you talk about knocking and contenders either needing some extra shooting, some scoring, some bench depth, whatever it is, if teams come calling for that, the Bulls are in prime position to be able to move on from him because, again, he's not part of the long-term plan yet, right? And so that's it. The question about this is, there's no question about, I should say, the value that he brings the young core right now. I've laid it out in multiple episodes. Go back to those episodes if you need me to paint it with a little bit more detail for you. But Norman Powell does bring immediate veteran presence and value to this team. But that value at the trade deadline could be there. He's the perfect kind of veteran for a rebuild. He's useful if he stays, and he could get valuable if he ends up going on that trade market. And I think that that's another sign of a good deal by Bryson Graham and how he set this team up. The other veteran that we acquired this year, that's Nic Claxton, right? Nic Claxton is somebody who's he has 2 more years left on his deal, and he could very well be somebody that the Bulls could move on from. Or like I said, he could end up staying. He's in the same boat as Norman Powell. You look at Nic Claxton's deal, $23 million this year, $21 million. He is the other player. I said Norman Powell is the only one. I forgot Nic Claxton's deal. $21 million next year, and this is a reasonable contract for a player that's 27 years old. And he could end up staying past this contract and being our backup big to a center that we draft that ends up becoming our starting center. Maybe that's Noah Essengay in the future. I can't say that yet. We don't know what Noah Essengay's position is going to be. But Nic Claxton's in that. He brings, as far as the immediate value that he brings, rim protection, vertical spacing, lob threat ability, the switchability, and a cleaner on the front court as far as being able that weak side defense and rim protection. His fit with Josh Giddey is going to be huge in telling us how the Bulls should view him for the long-term future. If him and Giddey build that chemistry that it seems like they can on paper, the answer is going to be so easy as far as basketball-wise. The contract's important. It's a declining contract, so it's less next year than it is this year, and that's what brings value to trades if you do start to get the matching salary, and even if you need to play the third team in a move, right? This is where the Bulls are trying to test to see what Norman Powell can be long-term for this team. At 27, he's kind of right outside the timeline of our players, but he still could be here for a very long time. Nic Claxton can play another 5, 6, 7, maybe even more years than that. Now, how many of those years is he going to be, a plus player? We'll see. But there's a world in which that absolutely does happen. But it's there. Nic Claxton, much like Norman Powell, he could be here if he fits, but if the fit works too well and his trade value rises on that contract, he could be a player that could be moved as well to gain some more assets. But again, it really comes down how he fits in with those young guys. The fit on paper is really good, and I can completely see a world in which that fit ends up playing out in real life, and then you're holding on to Nic Claxton long term. Then let's get to the front court pieces. I want to talk about Zach Collins. I want to talk about Jalen Smith. Zach Collins signed a 2-year, $17 million deal with a team option in the second year. And while health is a concern for him, we all know that. We know what he provides when he is healthy and on the court. He's quality backup center depth. He brings physicality. He sets hard screens. He brings you have to respect him shooting wise because he can knock down a three if you leave him. And he brings some insurance for Nic Claxton. Now on the flip side of that, signing him to an extension made him immediately trade eligible. Now, while some Bulls fans had hoped that mean we were going to trade him immediately this offseason, and I guess it's not over with yet. We possibly still could, but that deal is really reasonable. That is a cheap we saw backup centers get $14 million. Right now, Zach Collins isn't always healthy, so that plays a part into it. But to have basically a one-year flyer on Zach Collins to where if he does have another season that's riddled with injuries, you can opt out of that contract and boom, no harm, no foul after this season. That brings really good optionality. And again, if Zach Collins ends up playing well, and even if you look at him and say, all right, we can find another backup center next year, and teams come calling at the trade deadline for big man depth that can also shoot and set hard screens, another movable asset, right? Jalen Smith, same thing, $9.4 million expiring salary. Now, expiring salary doesn't have the value I think that it used to have. At the trade deadline, it's still pretty valuable, especially because it expires at the end of that season. So if he's used in a 3-team trade or something like that, it's all good. But I think when you look at it, like he has the potential to back up multiple positions, the 4 or the 5, right? And with Zach Collins and his injury history, it's not unreasonable to expect that we may see some Jalen Smith at the 5 minutes if Zach Collins can't keep his ass healthy. But we know what he brings. He spaces the floor. He brings some rim protection. He's not the on-ball defender that some people try to make him out to be, but I do think he's a guy that also Jalen Smith is another guy that could very well stick around longer past this contract. The Bulls could look to extend him. Jalen is a guy that he's 26 years old. If we talk about Nic Claxton potentially fitting the timeline, Jalen Smith could be a long-term depth piece here if he decides to re-sign here and the Bulls decide to keep on to him. But if not, if the Bulls have any inkling that they either don't want to keep him or he's not going to want to stay here, you can move him at the trade deadline and then gain something back. And again, I'm saying all this to say, I don't know what you're going to, like Norman Powell, but with the $20 million contract, maybe you can get a protected first-round pick back. We're seeing picks be a lot more protected, first-round picks be a lot more protected and valued now while teams adjust to the new lottery rules. So I don't know if the Bulls are going to get like first back in all of this. But again, when you talk about potentially getting something back and not losing a player for nothing, the Bulls are in that position. Bryson Graham is aggressive in that sense. So Jalen Smith's another guy with that one. And then Tre Jones. Tre Jones may be the cleanest trade deadline asset that we have for the Chicago Bulls, right? He's useful. He's affordable. He's the type of guard that contenders like. He's a guy that competes on the defensive side of the ball. And while his three-point shooting isn't the best, right? And sometimes he does suffer from that. I'm just going to pass up a three-point shot because I don't want to take it. When you look at Tre Jones, $8 million contract this year, $8 million next year on a team option, which could be very valuable for teams. And the reason why being is that, hey, even if a team needs Tre Jones now at the trade deadline, we should say, and you trade him, but then they want to leave their optionality open, they can opt out of the deal at any point in the offseason. So there you go with that one. Or they can keep it on a reasonable $8 million. Tre Jones brings floor leadership, right? He brings leadership on the floor, a high IQ player, doesn't play mistake, like he's mistake-free on the basketball court. He does not make a lot of mistakes, and he's an efficient scorer because he does know what his limitations are as a scorer. He's very efficient in how he does that. He averaged 14 points, 5.4 rebounds, and 1.2 steals last season while shooting 55.3% from the field. The Bulls can absolutely use him. And I think that as a backup point guard to Josh Giddey, there's tons of value there, especially for a young roster that needs structure. They need guys who can create in the half court, even when Josh Giddey's off the court. So the value for the Bulls, their past this season, is there, especially as Caleb Wilson's learning to do his own shot. Modest is still learning to create his own shot, right? Nic Claxton is going to need somebody that can create for him. Dalen Swain, he can create in the mid-range, but if you want to grow him as a catch-and-shoot player, you're going to need players like Tre Jones around. So there you go. He has a path to be part of the future, but if for some reason Bryson Graham does not view him as part of that, hey, this is a deal that's we heard at the trade deadline there are a lot of teams interested in Tre Jones. Now, we didn't see him move, so take that for what you are. He may not be the loudest name in this bunch, but he may be one of the cleanest assets that the Chicago Bulls have overall. When you look at on-the-court value plus the value of the contract, Tre Jones may be the best match of all of that with only $8 million contract and the value he's able to provide on the court. And then lastly, Isaac Okoro. Isaac Okoro is in an interesting spot here, right? Because a lot of Bulls fans are ready to see Isaac Okoro go. And I can't knock you for that. And I'm going to be clear on this. I feel everything that you're saying in regards to that. But at the same time, I could see a world in which Tre Jones is either out of the rotation because a Dalen Swain may pass him up. Norman Powell's getting a lot of those minutes. God forbid a guy like of all our forwards, Leonard Miller, Noah Essengay, Jalen Smith have to play. Some of those guys are going to play minutes at the 3, which could leave Isaac Okoro out. We'll see what happens with that guard rotation. But overall, Isaac Okoro could find himself out of the rotation, or, and I know people aren't going to want to hear this, Isaac Okoro to find himself one of Tiago Splitter's favorite defensive pieces. With the Chicago Bulls not having a lot of on-ball defenders, right? Norman Powell, perfectly fine team defender. Tre Jones, really, really solid on-ball defender. Miles Buzelis was solid on-ball and pick and roll is where he lacks at. Caleb Wilson's going to be a solid on-ball defender. Nic Claxton's going to be that roaming, switchable defender. But then you look to the bench. Isaac Okoro could definitely be somebody that, like, when you look at, like, in that Matisse Thybulle type role or Tamari Kamara role, like, Isaac Okoro, there's a case to be made that Isaac Okoro can try to fit that role. And with better frontline defense, having Nic Claxton defensively, and if Zach Collins can keep his ass healthy defensively, and having Caleb Wilson in front court, better front court defense and better rim protection actually brings out the best sides of what Isaac Okoro can do defensively. So I think that it makes sense that Isaac Okoro could become a weapon for Tiago Splitter on the defensive side of the ball, or he can find himself completely out of this rotation. And that's really what it comes down to. I think the defining factors for Isaac Okoro come down to how much can he hit that corner 3 and how consistently can he do it, as much as in his slashing game, but also the level of defense he consistently brings for this team. But he's an $11 million expiring contract, and the value being included in other deals is definitely there because of the size of the contract and the fact that it's not a very long contract either. And that's where you sit there with Isaac Okoro. So those are the veterans, right? And it really comes down to what's the trade deadline philosophy for Bryson Graham. We don't know this yet. He probably doesn't even know this yet. We're in evaluation mode, right? But I think when you look at it, Bryson Graham is probably entering the season doing this. He wants to develop the young core who fits Tiago Splitter's long-term philosophies and identity that he wants to build coaching-wise, and then who has more value to other teams than what they could potentially bring for Chicago. That's the question at the trade deadline. The trade deadline is not about selling everything. I want to be clear there. It's about knowing which veteran is worth your future, and then if you find the ones that aren't and find deals for those guys, going out and capitalizing on that. That's really what it's about, and we'll see, right? Now, moving on from that, I want to talk about Tiago Splitter, and the test for Tiago Splitter has already started in Summer League. When you look at some of the quotes that have been said from these rookies by Tiago Splitter, they get you really excited, right? When you look at it, for example, Caleb Wilson said this. First, he has a big accent, which you already know. Also, he's very detailed. He knows what he wants you to do. He's pretty serious. Most coaches, you have coaches who are joking around and stuff like that. Tiago's pretty serious. He knows what he wants. Then Caleb Wilson also says, that's how I approach it. I'd rather have someone serious and straightforward with me so I know what I need to do to get better. Then you talk about Swain's comments on him. Says he's great. He's a player. He played the game, so he understands. He's really good at explaining. Sometimes his accent is hard to understand, which I don't get that. Like, Tiago's accent isn't really that hard to understand, but he says sometimes it's hard to understand him, but he explains things, and you can tell how passionate he is. So he's going to get this message across. And I really appreciate coaches that have that same passion for winning and development. What the next few seasons, I'm not going to say just in this one season, is about for Tiago Splitter is that it's about showing, are you a developmental coach that is here to set the foundation, meaning that you get that foundation, you get the groundwork done on development of these players, and then somebody else has to come in when it's time to get over the top, right? When it's time to really switch from development to competing, not every coach makes that switch with a franchise. They just don't, right? And so when you look at it, Tiago Splitter could very much be a guy that's like Mark Jackson, Vinny Del Negro, Doug Collins, right? Guys that come in and set the foundation, or are they long-term coaches? Is he a Phil Jackson? Is he a Rick Carlisle? Is he one of those type of coaches that not only can set the foundation of building with young players, Eric Spoelstra, right? Is he one of those guys that can set the foundation, set the growth, but then also when you make your switch to being ready to compete and contend, hopefully, is he going to be the guy that can still do that and still be there with this team? That's what you're asking yourself, right? It's way too early to know now because much like these players are developing, Tiago Splitter is still developing as a coach, right? This is the first time Tiago Splitter was hired as a head coach. That's it. He was the interim head coach in Portland. This is his first job where he is hired to be the head coach here. The things the key evaluation points that I think you want to look at for Tiago that are going to tell, is he just a foundation setting coach, or is he the long-term coach, right? And again, you want to look at this over 3-4 years. It's not something you're going to see in year one, but how does the team develop over these next 2-3 years, right? Are the young players continuing to buying into his message? That no nonsense, the serious part that he brings, does that wear thin on players eventually once they start getting extensions and paid and stuff like that? Does he build a real identity here with the Chicago Bulls, which that's a key part for any coach. If you want to be a long-term head coach, you have to build a true identity. One that when players come in, they realize that they have to play your style first, and that's going to lead them to being good NBA players, right? And then can you adjust tacticianally? Like, can you be a tactician on the basketball court to where you're adjusting to not only where the game is going and game to game, but also as your players develop, are you growing in how you use them and not painting them into boxes as roles? And does he manage the veterans and the youth well combined? You got to speak to both of those sides. You can really connect with the young players, but if you don't connect with the veterans as well, because you're always going to need some shape, form of veteran on your roster, that's something. And then also, does the front office trust him long-term beyond an early rebuild? Now, it's easy to say yes now because they hired him, but we've seen where that's changed. Hell, you look at Billy Donovan and AK, the fact that relationship started splintering towards the end there, when all we heard throughout the majority of Billy Donovan's time here is, hey, part of the reason they love Billy Donovan so much is his collaborative. They see things the same way. Then we started finding out maybe that wasn't as much as what we talked about, right? The first question is whether Tiago can build the foundation. And that's a question that I feel really, really good about. I feel like just in hearing Tiago speak, seeing what he did with Portland, I feel really good that Tiago Splitter can build the foundation here. But the next question, and the question that's going to take time to see, is that can he still be the coach that when that foundation becomes real, can he get you to the next level? And again, there's no knock on him if he can't do that. There's a lot of coaches, really good coaches in the NBA that just can't get over that hump. And they can't do it consistently, right? And so that's a question. There's a lot of coaches that have won a lot of games in their career, but have not been able to get over that hump. And we'll see if Tiago, and again, I'm not saying that he's not going to be that. I'm just saying that there's something to watch and see develop in that. It's been a long time since we had, a head coach that also needed to develop. I mean, we had Jim Boylan who needed to develop. He's too much of an idiot to realize that. So, you have that. And so now we'll see what's going to happen in regards to that. But we also did get updates on Tiago Splitter's staff. So while Tiago did say that his staff's not done yet, he did say that his staff is going to include Wes Unseld Jr., so he is staying on for anybody who's still questioning that. Henry Domercant, Austin Default, Martin Rennick, L.D. Williams, and Pete Crawford. So, and Tiago specifically said that it was important to him to keep some guys on here that the young players are already familiar with and knew, and I think that makes sense. Now, one name that was not mentioned in that was Dan Craig. Now, it was mentioned that all of Wes Unseld's development staff is going to stay on, and Dan Craig was also a head of development, so I wonder if he's just part of that, but we haven't heard if Dan Craig's going to stay on specifically. But I do think that it's good to have a mix of new voices as well as established voices with these young players, and you have that, right? I think that's there. He said he wants coaches that understand these players as well, but he did say that new voices have to align with his style, and he wants development-minded assistants and defensive and offensive structure builders is what Tiago Splitter wants. Tiago's doing it the right way. I think what Tiago's doing with building his staff, he seems to be doing it the right way. He seems to have the right mindset about it, and I hope that helps get this Bulls over this hump into this next era as well. But that's going to do it for today's episode, man. The Bulls may not make another big move in this offseason, and that's fine, but make no mistake about it. Bryson Graham has built this roster with options going into the trade deadline, going into the season, and we'll see. We'll see how these veterans help these young players develop, which one of these guys show themselves to be longer-term options outside of the season for the Chicago Bulls, and which could be trade deadline moves. I think that this could be another, I wouldn't say exciting trade deadline for the Bulls to get a bunch of talent back, but it could be another busy trade deadline for the Chicago Bulls as they kind of reconstruct and take advantage of some of these, 1 or 2 year deals that they have left on some of these veterans, and we'll see what happens in that. Drop your thoughts down in the comment section down below. I want to hear how you guys feel about all of this. Make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode or an upload. You can follow us at Bull Central Pod. You send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. And lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the #1 spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, but that is thanks to you, lovely and beautiful people. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See you ready if you can, y'all. Hey.
This